My name is Chris. I'm 26 years old, and about 3 hours ago, I finally unlocked the door to the new apartment that cost me almost my entire savings. I let out a weary sigh as the stubborn deadbolt gave way with a metallic screech. The door swung inward, revealing the emptiness I'd bought into. It was supposed to be a milestone, a triumph of independence. But this place, a converted late 19th century townhouse, felt less like a victory and more like a compromise. The air was thick with the smell of old dust, cheap fresh paint, and something else, something faintly sweet and decayed. The first night was uneventful, filled with the standard symphony of the newspaper, the hum of the refrigerator, the random creaks of ancient floorboards settling, the distant sigh of city traffic. It was on the third night that the other sounds began. I was slumped on the floor, back against a box labeled "Kitchen Fragile," shoveling lukewarm lo mein from a cardboard container when I heard it. It wasn't the building. It was too deliberate. A whistle. It was faint, thin and reedy, like air escaping from a tiny puncture. It wasn't a tune, not really. It was just 3 notes. A high, clear note, a descending drop, and a long, shaky sustain. Then it would repeat. Over and over. I froze, a noodle halfway to my mouth. I held my breath, listening. The hum of the fridge clicked off. In the sudden silence, the whistle was all there was. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, from the walls, the ceiling, the very air itself. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding ridiculously small and human against the eerie, mechanical sound. The whistling didn't stop. It didn't falter. It just continued its mindless, 3-note cycle. I spent the next hour like a madman, pressing my ear against the cold plaster of every wall in the cramped one-bedroom apartment. It was strongest in the hallway, near the fuse box and a small, locked utility closet the super had said was for building maintenance only, nothing for you to worry about. The sound seemed to emanate from behind that door, seeping through the thin crack at the bottom. Rational thoughts, brittle as old glass, began to form. Air in the pipes. Wind against a cracked window pane somewhere. A neighbor's weird, late-night hobby. I clung to these explanations, repeating them like a mantra until I finally fell into a fitful sleep, the 3 notes weaving through my dreams. The next morning, the whistling was gone. The normal sounds of the city had returned. I felt a flush of embarrassment at my panic. "See?" I told myself. "Just a building settling. Nothing to worry about." But it came back the next night. And the night after that. Always starting around 9 p.m., always the same 3 notes. It became a ritual. I'd eat my dinner to its empty soundtrack, my skin crawling. I started sleeping with headphones on, playing white noise loud enough to make my ears ring. It barely helped. The whistle was less a sound and more a sensation, a vibration that found its way into my skull. I couldn't take it. I complained to Mr. Henderson, the building superintendent, a man who smelled of cigar smoke and resignation. He listened to me with a patient smile, but his eyes were dismissive. "Ah, the whistling," he said, wiping his greasy hands on an even greaser rag. "Yeah, folks have mentioned it before. Old building, kid. Lots of noises. Steam in the radiators. Probably a draft in the ductwork. Nothing to lose sleep over. It doesn't sound like steam," I insisted, my voice tighter than I intended. "It sounds intentional." His smile faded, replaced by a flicker of something else. Annoyance? Or was it caution? "Just don't listen too hard, son. Some sounds, it's best to just let 'em be." His words did the opposite of reassure me. Don't listen too hard. It was an admission. He knew. They all knew. That night, the whistling changed. It was still the same 3 notes, but underneath it, I heard something new. A voice. It was a whisper, shredded and thin, tangled within the notes, like a ghostly harmony. I couldn't make out words, only a feeling of profound, endless sorrow. It was the sound of loneliness that had curdled into something else. My fear turned into a cold, hard knot of determination. This wasn't in my head. This was real. The next day, I waited for the super to leave for his lunch break. With a screwdriver and a nervous sweat on my palms, I jimmied the cheap lock on the utility closet in the hallway. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a shallow space filled with the building's guts, dusty electrical conduits, a main water shutoff valve, and a network of old, iron pipes wrapped in crumbling asbestos insulation. And there, tucked between 2 large pipes, was the source. It wasn't a ghost. It was a thing. A construct. It looked like a crude doll, fashioned from yellowed wax cloth, bits of bone that looked too small and delicate to be animal, and dark, matted hair. It was pinned to a wooden joist by a long, rusted iron nail driven through its chest. Its mouth was a stitched-shut X made of black thread. But someone had unpicked the stitches. The threads hung loose, and the waxen lips were parted into a small, open O. And from that horrible, man-made mouth, the 3-note whistle was being pushed out by a current of air escaping from a tiny, precisely drilled hole in the pipe behind it. This was no accident. This was placed. This was created. As I stared, revolted and mesmerized, the whispery voice seemed to solidify, rising from beneath the whistle. The air growing colder around me, the single bare bulb in the closet flickered. "Found me," the voice sighed, a sound of dry leaves and despair. "You listened." I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a haunting. It was a prison. Someone had made this thing, and bound it here, to this spot, to this sound, using the building's own breathing to give it a voice for eternity. The whistling stopped. In the sudden, absolute silence, the thing's head turned on the nail with a soft, grinding sound. The stitched eyes seemed to focus on me. The whisper was clear now, no longer tangled in the notes, but cold and direct in my mind. No one ever listens long enough to hear. They just hear the whistle. But you stayed. You can take my place. The iron nail began to slowly creak itself out of the wood. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. A raw, primal instinct took over. I slammed the utility closet door shut and ran back into my apartment, shoving a bookcase in front of the hallway door, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. It's 8:59 p.m. I'm recording this on my phone, huddled in the farthest corner of my bedroom. I can hear it, even through the door. The whistling has started again. The same 3 notes. But it's different tonight. It's not coming from the closet anymore. It's coming from right outside my bedroom door. And I feel a strange, irresistible urge to purse my lips and whistle back. My name is James. I am 32 years old, and I have made a terrible mistake. In my arrogance, I believed the old tales were merely that, tales. I sought a quiet, inexpensive place to focus on my writing, and the old Victorian house on the edge of town, with its peeling paint and overgrown garden, seemed a perfect retreat. The rent was a pittance. I should have known why. The estate agent, a Mr. Albright, was a gaunt man with fingers stained yellow by tobacco and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. He handed me the iron key, its teeth cold and intricate. "The top floor," he said, his voice a dry rustle. "The attic space is to remain locked. It is not part of the lease. You are not to disturb it. Do you understand?" I agreed readily. An unused attic meant fewer drafts, fewer noises. I signed the papers without another thought. The first few nights were peaceful. The house settled around me with sighs and whispers, the natural song of aged timber and stone. I took the large master bedroom on the first floor, my typewriter perched on a desk by the window overlooking the silent, mist-shrouded garden. It was on the fourth night that the scratching began. It was not the sound of a branch against a pane, nor the scuttling of some common rodent. This was a slow, deliberate scraping. It came from above, from behind the bolted door at the end of the second-floor hallway that led to the attic. It was the sound of something hard, like a nail, being dragged across the underside of the floorboards. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself it was the house. But a cold dread, primitive and absolute, had already taken root in my stomach. I spent the night in my chair, a glass of brandy trembling in my hand, listening to that methodical, patient sound. In the light of day, my courage returned, tempered by irritation. I was a man of reason. I would investigate. I fetched the stepladder from the garden shed and marched upstairs to the bolted door. The lock was ancient, a heavy brass thing. But the bolt itself, I saw with a surge of triumph, was near steel. It was fastened from my side of the door. I had no key for the lock, but the bolt was mine to control. The scratching had stopped. Perhaps, I thought, it was an animal, and it had died up there. The smell would be dreadful. I had a right to know. Against the explicit warning of Mr. Albright, I slid the heavy bolt back. It echoed in the silent hallway. I put my shoulder to the door, and with a groan of protest, it swung inward, releasing a gust of air so cold and foul it made me gag. It smelled of old soil, of rot, and of something metallic, like stale blood. The staircase beyond was steep and narrow, swallowed by an absolute blackness. The little light from the hallway revealed the first few steps, thick with dust. And in that dust I saw them. Footprints. Small, bare, and unmistakably human. They did not lead down the stairs. They led up into the darkness, as if something had walked up from the attic and stopped just out of sight. I slammed the door shut and drove the bolt home, my heart hammering. I did not sleep that night. The scratching did not return. Instead, I heard a new sound. A soft, wet coughing from the other side of the door. Then, a whisper. "So cold." The voice was thin, broken, a thing of fragments and despair. It was the voice of a child. My rational mind shattered. This was no animal. This was something else. Something that knew I was here. The following day, I went to find Mr. Albright. His small office was shuttered, a closed sign hanging crookedly in the window. A neighbor saw me peering in. "Looking for Albright?" he asked, his face grim. "Gone to visit his sister upcountry," he said. "Won't be back for a month." I knew then I had been abandoned to it. That night, the whispers grew clearer. I sat at the top of the main stairs, a fire poker clutched in my hand, listening to the voice from behind the bolted door. "Let me in," it pleaded. "Just for a moment. Just to get warm. He left me here. He left me in the dark." Terror warred with a desperate, pitying horror inside me. A child? Trapped? Was it possible? Had some previous tenant? My mind raced with awful possibilities. "I can't," I called out, my voice cracking. "Who are you?" A soft, broken sob. "Emily. My name is Emily." He said I was bad. He said I had to stay in the dark until I was sorry. I've been sorry for so long. The voice was so real, so utterly convincing in its anguish. A part of me, the rational part that was now screaming, knew it was a trick. But the larger part, the human part, heard the suffering of a child. I found myself moving toward the door, my hand hovering over the bolt. "I can help you," I whispered, my forehead pressed against the cold wood. "I can get you out." The voice changed. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a chilling, sly curiosity. "Out? Oh no. I don't want out. I want in." The bolt, of its own accord, began to slide back. Not with a jerk, but smoothly, slowly, as if an invisible hand were guiding it. I stumbled backward, falling onto the hallway runner. The door swung open. The darkness in the stairwell was no longer empty. It was a solid thing, a presence. And from within it, a small figure emerged. It was a girl, or the shape of one, in a tattered white nightdress. Her skin was the color of old wax, and her hair hung in lank, dark strands. But her eyes were wrong. They were solid black, like polished stones, and they held a knowledge that was ancient and cruel. She did not walk down the stairs. She drifted, her bare feet not touching the wood. The terrible cold rolled off her in waves. "You listened," she said, and her voice was no longer that of a child. It was a chorus of whispers, the sound of many voices speaking from one throat. "You are sorry for me. It is enough." I scrambled back, but the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly behind me. She was suddenly before me, her small, cold hand closing around my wrist. Her touch burned with a frostbite agony. "He needed a new tenant," she whispered, her black eyes holding mine. "The old one grew too quiet. But you are still warm. You will make noise for a long, long time." She pulled me, not with physical strength, but with a will that dismantled my own. I could not scream. I could not fight. I was drawn into the freezing darkness of the stairwell. The door slammed shut behind me, and I heard the bolts slide home on the outside. The estate agent's warning echoes in the perpetual dark. The attic is not part of the lease. He did not mean it was not included. He meant it was already occupied. I am here now. It is so cold. I scratch at the door with broken nails. I whisper to the silence below, hoping someone new, someone kind and foolish, will hear me and listen. My name is Oliver. I am 45 years old, and my life has become a quiet, solitary thing since the divorce. I am a historian by trade, a man who finds more comfort in the past than in the present. It was this preference that led me to book a long-term stay at the Grantham Hotel, a grand, decaying relic from the Gilded Age, scheduled for demolition next month. I wanted to document its history, to walk its halls before they were dust. I should have heeded the warnings of the townfolk. They called it a sad place. They did not know the half of it. The lobby was a cathedral of faded opulence. Water-stained murals of sylvan scenes adorned the ceilings, and a thick layer of dust coated the velvet drapes. The sole employee was a skeletal old man named Mr. Hemlock, who served as clerk, bellhop, and I suspected caretaker for the dead. "You are in room 309, sir," he said, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. He handed me a heavy brass key. "The hotel is particular. The other guests value their privacy. It is best not to disturb them. And, sir, should you hear the dinner bell, it is not for you. Do not come down." I took the key with a nod, assuming his words were the eccentricities of an old man devoted to a dying place. My room was a time capsule, a four-poster bed with a moth-eaten canopy, a writing desk, and a cold fireplace. The air smelled of beeswax, old books, and a faint, cloying sweetness I could not identify. The first few days were peaceful. I spent my time sketching moldings, photographing light fixtures, and transcribing the names of forgotten industrialists from the guest ledger. I never saw another soul, though I often heard them, the soft click of a door closing down the hall, the faint murmur of a radio through the wall, the creak of a floorboard from the room above. The Grantham was not empty. It was sleeping. On the fifth night, I was awakened by a sound that froze the blood in my veins. A single, clear, silver note reverberated through the silent hotel. A dinner bell. Mr. Hemlock's warning echoed in my mind. "It is not for you. Do not come down." I stayed in my bed, pulling the covers tight. But then I heard them. Doors. One after another, up and down the hallway, doors opened and closed. Soft, shuffling footsteps passed my door. I heard no conversation, only the sound of movement, a slow procession of guests heading downstairs. A historian's curiosity is a potent, and often foolish, thing. I had to see. I crept to my door and opened it a crack. The hallway was filled with guests. Men in tailcoats, women in gowns that shimmered under the weak gaslight sconces. They moved in a silent, somber parade towards the grand staircase. Their faces were indistinct, blurred as if seen through a fogged window, but their clothes were impeccably clear. They were ghosts of a long dead evening. Terrified yet mesmerized, I did the one thing I was warned not to do. I followed. I kept to the shadows, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. They drifted into the grand ballroom, which was no longer dusty and decayed. It was ablaze with the light of 1,000 candles. A feast was laid out on a long table, roasted fowl, glistening jellies, great cuts of beef. The air hummed with the sound of a string quartet I could not see, playing a waltz that was popular a century ago. But the guests did not eat. They did not dance. They simply stood around the table, their blurred faces turned towards the head of the room. I followed their gaze. A man sat there, sharp and clear amidst the haze. He was gaunt, with sunken eyes and a cruel, thin mouth. He was cutting into a roast with an unnerving precision. He was the only one who seemed real. He looked up from his plate, and his eyes, dark and hungry, scanned the room. They passed over the spectral guests and landed directly on me, cowering in the doorway. A smile stretched across his face, a terrible, welcoming gesture. "Ah," his voice cut through the phantom music, dry and sharp as a razor. "We have a new guest. Mr. Oliver Price. How good of you to join us. We were just beginning the final course." The entire assembly turned their featureless faces towards me. The music stopped. The room fell into a silence so profound I could hear the dust settling. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The guests began to move toward me, not walking, but gliding, their forms becoming more solid with every passing second. I saw the details then, the pallor of their skin, the emptiness in their eyes, the dust that clung to their fine clothes. The man at the head of the table stood, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "Do not be alarmed," he said, his voice now a soothing, sinister whisper in my ear, though he had not moved. "The Grantham requires a final guest to complete the party. A historian. How fitting. You will help us remember. Forever." Mr. Hemlock appeared at my side, his face a mask of sorrow. "I did warn you, sir," he whispered. "The dinner bell was not for you." The guests surrounded me. Their cold hands laid upon my arms, my shoulders, guiding me not with force, but with an irresistible, glacial pressure. They led me to the table, to an empty seat beside the gaunt man. A plate of dust-covered fruit, rotten and crawling with things I dared not name, was set before me. "Eat," the gaunt man commanded, his eyes gleaming with a malicious delight. "Become part of the history you so adore. I am writing this now, seated at this eternal banquet. The brass key to room 309 is cold in my pocket. The other guests have returned to their silent vigil, waiting. The man they call the host watches me, smiling. The bell will ring again soon, and new footsteps will echo in the hall above. I must try to warn them that I must whisper when they pass my door. Do not come down. For God's sake, when you hear the bell, do not come down. The final chorus is always a new guest. And the Grantham Hotel is always so very hungry.